Okay, so hi Anne, thank you for joining me today. As we started the week with you having your in-discussion event with Kirsty Donnelly, our CEO, we thought it would be quite nice to end the week asking you a couple of questions that came in about the session that you had, if that's okay.
That's fine, Clare, and it's good to be back with City and Guilds at the end of the week.
Great, and yeah, thank you. We've had a really exciting week of content here. So yeah, it's great to have you back to ask a few questions. So I'm just going to fire some questions at you that we've had through this week. So I think just thinking back on your time as when you were Skills and Apprenticeship Minister, we've been lucky enough to have Gillian Keegan talking to one of our former apprentices this week. What was your favourite thing when you were doing that job?
I think without a doubt the visits, they were always the best bit of the job. You spend a lot of time in the Department for Education thinking about policy, but actually the place that you learnt most was when you went out and visited colleges or training providers, but in particular meeting apprentices and hearing about their experience and meeting their employers, many of whom are so good at supporting their apprentices at whatever level. It was a fantastic part of the job and often very moving, very inspiring.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Okay, well, thank you for that. And I guess while you're doing that job and just thinking about afterwards, if you could have your time again, or maybe even now, as you know, you can do an apprenticeship at any age. Are there any apprenticeships that you would like to do if you could?
I was often asked this actually, what would you do if you became an apprentice now? And of course I was an apprentice. I did my nurse training as an apprentice. Yeah. Student nurses were the apprentices, the workforce actually, that kept the NHS going, certainly in hospitals. The one thing I always come back to is doing a land-based apprenticeship. I think if I had my time again, that's what I'd do. Either in land management of some description, countryside management, or possibly I would go into construction, you know.
Yeah, I think you're looking to the future. There are lots of jobs coming up in construction.
Well, I've always thought it must be so nice to make that you are literally making things and creating something that other people are really going to enjoy and value. So construction or a land-based one.
Okay, that's interesting. And obviously after you were a nurse and then you went on to become an MP. So I think an interesting question that came in is, do you think we should have apprenticeships to become MPs?
It's quite difficult to build in an apprenticeship, but I think work experience. When I was an MP, I used to make every available opportunity to give young people work experience and old people, actually, because I think it's quite important not only to learn how the democratic system works, but also to see what the life of an MP is like, so that if you do think about doing it, then you've had a bit of a taster. Quite difficult with electoral rules the way they are and how our democracy works, but you can give young people and older people a real taste of what going into politics is all about.
Yeah, that's a really interesting reflection. Yeah, I think thinking back as your time when you're an MP and when you're a minister, what did you find the most challenging aspect of your role, and probably actually more of your time as a minister and thinking about skills and apprenticeship policy? What were the biggest challenges you found?
Well, I think managing time is always very difficult, and a lot of apprentices will feel that. I put out a tweet this week about the fact that it's hard work if you're working and learning at the same time. You know, this isn't a walk in the park. And so time would be the thing that I think was most challenging. But I also think, you know, governments and the Department for Education and the officials you work alongside with come up with ideas about policy. And I think the real challenge is making sure that that actually works on the ground. We all know we have great ideas, and then you enact them and you think, well, that wasn't maybe such a great idea because it doesn't quite work out like that. And so making sure that you got changes and different directions of policy, made sure, working out to how you made sure that those actually work on the ground is important and actually can be very difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. I guess with that experience that you've had some time out of Parliament now, as we talked about. There's been some really inspiring stories of apprentices and apprenticeships this week. What would be the biggest or the most important piece of advice that you would offer to someone either thinking about doing an apprenticeship or who's already doing one?
I think if you're thinking about it, the only piece of advice I would give is go on and do it. There's almost no downside to doing an apprenticeship. If you're unsure about whether to study or whether to go out for work, do an apprenticeship. You can always go back and study full time at another stage in your life. And for the apprentices out there at the moment, again, it's stick with it. You know, it's been a challenging time if you've been an apprentice. You know, the difficulty of getting into workplaces, having that practical experience. And I think also getting benefit from your other workplace colleagues. You know, good apprenticeship will have work mentors, people supporting them, older adults who've maybe been working for the same employer, and that support is very, very important. And a lot of them won't have had so much of that. So stick with it and know that with all the difficulties that we've been through in the last year and the difficulties that will sit ahead, know that you will be ahead of the game. You will have done your apprenticeship, you will have got a qualification, but you will have also had that invaluable work experience. And you might well decide to change sectors, go in a slightly different direction, but the experience you've got, the qualification you've got will be invaluable and put you well ahead of the game.
Great. Yeah, I think I'd agree with everything that you said there. And just finally, the final question that we've had in is thinking about the future. Do you think that apprenticeships will change at all in their nature?
I think they will, Claire. In 2017, we brought in big changes to apprenticeships. And inevitably, it takes a while for that to bed down. And it would be right for them to change and evolve as the workplace changes, as the need for different skills changes. So it's good when things change and evolve. Learning on past experience, what works well, but also making sure that we always think about how we can improve things, both for apprentices and for employers, because of course, we are reliant on employers to take on the apprenticeships. I hope this week, and the work that Sitting Guilds has done, I think will have quite a big impact on employers and make them think twice about maybe doubling the number of apprentices they've got. But reform is usually good. It's a good thing and the right thing. I hope what we'll also see is more people doing level 4 and 5 qualifications. A lot of people stop at a level 3. And also parents and teachers understanding the massive value an apprenticeship is for all the young people, whether they're academically strong or not, there's still a great option.
Yeah, and I agree with it. I think, yeah, careers advice is a big part of that picture.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Anne, for answering our questions today. It's been really useful, and thank you again for your time with Kirsty earlier on this week.
It's a pleasure, always a pleasure to work with Sitting Guilds.